The courtroom was already decided before anyone spoke. That was how Evelyn Harper felt as she stood near the defense table inside courtroom 16B of the New York State Supreme Court, her hands folded loosely in front of her, her posture straight but unremarkable. The room smelled faintly of old paper, disinfectant, and the kind of quiet desperation that clung to places where people lost things they could never replace. High ceilings, pale stone walls, an American flag standing stiff in the corner, like a witness that never intervened. The benches behind her were half full, not because anyone cared about the end of marriage, but because of the name attached to it. Harper, in Manhattan. The Harper name still meant leverage. Corporate leverage. Institutional leverage. The kind that didn't need to shout because it assumed compliance. Evelyn had learned that early in her marriage. That power rarely announced itself. It simply waited for others to move out of its way. Across the aisle sat her husband, Daniel Harper, relaxed in his seat like a man waiting for a receipt. His tailored charcoal suit fit perfectly, pressed within an inch of his life, his cufflinks subtle but expensive. He didn't look at Evelyn. He didn't need to. The outcome favored him. Everyone in the room understood that. Beside him sat Lauren Mitchell, legs crossed, heels angled toward the aisle, her hand resting on Daniel's forearm, as if it had always belonged there. She wore cream, deliberate, symbolic, bridal without apology. Her smile wasn't cruel. It was confident. Confidence was more dangerous. Lauren leaned in and whispered something. Daniel smirked. Evelyn kept her eyes forward. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Everyone sat. Paper shuffled. A clerk cleared his throat. Judge Raymond Keller adjusted his glasses and scanned the file in front of him. "We are here to finalize the dissolution of marriage between Daniel Harper and Evelyn Harper," he said evenly. "Mrs. Harper, you have waived your right to legal counsel. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." Her voice was calm, not rehearsed, not fragile. Lauren tilted her head slightly, studying Evelyn the way someone studies a person they've already dismissed. The judge nodded. "You understand that by signing these documents, you waive all claims to marital property, spousal support, business equity, and future financial interest in Harper Consolidated and its subsidiaries?" "Yes." A murmur moved through the room. Someone behind them whispered, "She's really walking away with nothing." Another voice replied, "She never had anything." Daniel finally spoke. "We're ready to proceed," he said, tone polite, impatient underneath. "We've all waited long enough." Lauren laughed softly. The clerk slid the papers across the table. A heavy black pen followed, placed carefully as if the act itself deserved ceremony. Evelyn stepped forward. The sound of her shoes echoed against the marble floor, louder than expected. She took the pen, uncapped it slowly, and glanced down at the document. Dense legal language. Final language. Words that erased years with surgical precision. Her eyes moved once. Not to Daniel, not to Lauren, but to the signature line. For a moment, the room leaned in. Then she signed. Evelyn Grace Harper. Clear, legible, steady. The pen didn't tremble. Her hand didn't hesitate. The judge stamped the page. Divorce granted. The gavel struck once. Lauren stood immediately, looping her arm through Daniel's with practiced ease. "Finally," she said under her breath. "I was getting bored." Daniel rose, straightening his jacket. He looked at Evelyn then, the way someone looks at a closed door. "You'll have 30 days to vacate the apartment," he said casually. "My assistant will send you the details." Evelyn nodded. Understood. Lauren stepped closer, her voice low but sharp. "You know," she said, smiling, "I always wonder how someone like you ended up here." Evelyn met her gaze. Calm, unreactive. "And now you don't have to wonder any more," Evelyn replied. Lauren blinked, unsettled for half a second, then dismissed it with a shrug. "Good luck," she said, not meaning it. They walked out together, confident, untouched, already planning the press cycle that would frame this as a clean break, a necessary upgrade. Evelyn remained where she was as the room emptied around her. No tears, no shaking hands, no collapse, just silence. Outside, the Manhattan air was cold and bright. Midday traffic rolled past the courthouse steps, horns and voices blending into the city's constant hum. Reporters lingered near the entrance, cameras ready for Daniel and Lauren. None of them turned when Evelyn stepped outside. She descended the steps alone. At the bottom, she stopped. She checked her watch. 11:46 a.m. She stood still. Minutes passed. Then the sound arrived, low, controlled, unmistakable. Engines. Not one. 3. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. Then another. Then a long black sedan between them. Perfect alignment. No rush. No spectacle. People turned. Cameras lifted. The rear door of the sedan opened. A man stepped out. Late 50s, gray at the temples, posture precise. His suit was expensive without being loud. His movements economical, his eyes scanning the area with practiced efficiency. He closed the door and walked toward Evelyn. He stopped in front of her and bowed. Not a nod, a bow. "Ms. Harper," he said clearly, "the board is assembled." Evelyn put on her sunglasses. "Any objections?" "None that survived the vote." She nodded once. "Good." Behind them, cameras began to click. Across the street, Daniel and Lauren exited the courthouse laughing, until Lauren noticed the cars. She slowed. "Daniel, who is that?" Daniel frowned, following her gaze. The man bowing. The vehicles. The stillness. "That doesn't matter," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. But he recognized the man. He had seen him in rooms he was never invited into. Rooms where real decisions were made. The sedan door opened again. Evelyn stepped inside, without looking back. The door closed with a heavy final sound. The convoy pulled away. Lauren stared after it. That was strange. Daniel forced a smile. It's New York. Everything's strange. But his eyes followed the cars until they disappeared into traffic. Nothing that bows is insignificant. Inside the sedan, the city noise vanished. Leather. Silence. Control. The man in the front seat turned slightly. "Ms. Harper, Sterling and Rowe intends to challenge the settlement. They're claiming coercion." Evelyn didn't react. "Let them. They're also pushing a narrative," he continued, "that you were a mistake, a charity case." Evelyn looked out the window at the passing skyline. "They've always needed a story where they're superior," she said. "Let them tell it." The sedan descended into a private entryway. Gates opened silently. Security cameras tracked their movement. The building they entered wasn't marked. It didn't need to be. They rode an elevator to the 60th floor. The doors opened to a boardroom overlooking Manhattan. 12 people sat around a long table. Men and women. Quiet power. No smiles. Evelyn walked to the head of the table. "Before we vote," she said calmly, "I want the report." A black folder was placed in front of her. Inside were numbers, holdings, leverage, and a photograph of Daniel and Lauren leaving a restaurant the night before, smiling for cameras, unaware of what had already shifted beneath them. Evelyn closed the folder. "They plan a press conference at 4, someone said. Evelyn checked the clock. Perfect. The vote appeared on the screen. Unanimous. She signed the transition papers with the same calm hand she'd used in court. Ink, authority, finality. "By the time my ex-husband steps up to that microphone," Evelyn said quietly, "he will already be bankrupt." No one questioned her. The city stretched below them, unaware. Evelyn Harper stood at the window, not triumphant, not angry, just finished waiting. Daniel Harper woke up with the comfortable certainty that the worst part was over. Sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Upper East Side apartment, reflecting off polished stone and glass, warming the room in a way that felt earned. The bed beside him was empty, but that didn't bother him. Lauren had left early, a charity brunch downtown, something with donors and cameras. She'd kissed his cheek before leaving, already talking about outfits for the press conference later that afternoon. He lay still for a moment, hands folded behind his head, listening to the distant hum of the city. New York always sounded different when you were winning. Softer, less threatening. Today was supposed to be clean. By 4 o'clock, he would stand behind a podium, smile gently, and tell the world that the divorce had been amicable, that he wished Evelyn the best, that Harper Consolidated was moving forward under stronger leadership. The talking points were already drafted. The PR firm had rehearsed them twice. He reached for his phone. No missed calls. No urgent messages. Good. Daniel showered, dressed carefully, and poured himself coffee in the kitchen that still smelled faintly of Evelyn's cooking, though he told himself that was just memory clinging to the place. 30 days. That was generous. He'd been generous. His phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. He frowned and answered. Daniel Harper. There was a pause on the other end. Too long. Not nervous. Calculated. Mr. Harper. A man finally said, "Calm. Professional. This is Mark Feldman from Ridgeway Capital. We need to speak immediately." Daniel's brow creased. "I have a press conference this afternoon." "This will take priority," Feldman replied. "It concerns your credit facilities." Daniel leaned back against the counter. "My facilities are in good standing." Another pause, this one heavier. "Mr. Harper," Feldman said, "as of 43 minutes ago, Ridgeway Capital has transferred its position." Daniel straightened. "Transferred to whom?" "I'm not authorized to disclose the buyer," Feldman replied. "But your revolving credit line has been frozen pending review." The word landed wrong. "Frozen? That doesn't make sense," Daniel said. "We're current." "Yes," Feldman agreed. "You were?" Daniel's phone vibrated again. Another call. Another unknown number. "Mark," Daniel said sharply, "I'll call you back." He ended the call and answered the second line. Daniel Harper. "Daniel," a woman said briskly, "this is Claire Simmons from North Atlantic Trust. We need to discuss your loan covenants." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. "I don't have time for this." "I'm afraid you do," she said. "Your account has been flagged for review. We're requesting immediate clarification on asset ownership." "What clarification?" Daniel snapped. "Specifically," Claire said, "the underlying collateral." Daniel hung up. The kitchen felt colder. He stared at his phone, waiting for it to vibrate again. It did. Then again. By the fourth call, he stopped answering. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator, irritation rising, telling himself this was routine. Markets moved. Banks shuffled. Nothing real ever happened this fast. Down in the lobby, the doorman nodded as usual, but there was a hesitation this time. A fraction too long. "Morning, Mr. Harper," the man said. Daniel nodded and stepped outside. The car service was already waiting. As he slid into the back seat, his phone lit up again. This time, it wasn't a bank. It was the CFO. Daniel answered. "I'm on my way." "You need to come to the office," the CFO said without preamble. His voice was tight. "Now." Daniel frowned. "I have a schedule." "You don't anymore," the CFO replied. "Daniel, our account are locked." Daniel laughed once, sharp. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking," the CFO said. "Payroll is due tomorrow." Daniel's laughter stopped. "What do you mean locked?" "I mean," the CFO said, lowering his voice, "every major account is frozen. Credit lines, operating cash, even the escrow accounts." Daniel stared out the window as the car merged into traffic. "Who did this?" The CFO hesitated. "We're tracing it." "Trace faster," Daniel snapped. "I'll be there in 20. When he arrived at Harper Consolidated headquarters, the building looked the same as it always had. Glass, steel, confidence. But inside, the air was wrong. People moved faster. Voices were lower. Phones rang and went unanswered. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt longer than usual. The conference room doors were already open. The board was assembled. That had never happened without notice. Daniel stepped inside, forcing his shoulders back. "What's going on?" No one answered immediately. The chairman cleared his throat. "Daniel, please sit." Daniel remained standing. "I asked a question." The CFO pushed a tablet across the table. "Take a look." Daniel glanced down. Ownership charts. transfer records, legal filings. His stomach dropped. This isn't possible, Daniel said. These are shell entities. Yes, the CFO agreed. And they're all controlled by the same holding company. Daniel looked up. Which is? The CFO swallowed. Vanguard Ridge. The name echoed. Daniel felt heat rise in his neck. That's not a competitor. No, the chairman said quietly. It's an acquisition vehicle. Daniel laughed again, but this time it sounded thin. For who? No one spoke. The silence stretched. Then the chairman said, For Evelyn Harper. The room tilted. Daniel gripped the back of a chair. That's not funny. It's not a joke, the CFO said. As of this morning, she controls 49% of Harper Consolidated's debt and assets. Daniel shook his head. She doesn't have that kind of money. The CFO didn't respond. Daniel's phone buzzed. Lauren. He ignored it. This is temporary, Daniel said more to himself than anyone else. She can't do anything without majority. The chairman folded his hands. We've just been informed that 2 institutional holders are preparing to sell. Daniel's mouth went dry. To who? The chairman met his eyes. To her. The room felt smaller. Daniel's phone buzzed again. Then again. Lauren, then an unknown number, then his attorney. He finally answered the attorney. What the hell is happening? Daniel demanded. There was no hesitation this time. Daniel, the attorney said, you need to postpone the press conference. Why? Because, the attorney said, choosing his words carefully, you no longer control the company you were planning to speak for. Daniel ended the call slowly. Around the table, the board watched him, not with anger, not with sympathy, but with distance. The way people look at someone who has already fallen, but hasn't hit the ground yet. Across the city, in a boardroom overlooking the same skyline, Evelyn Harper stood at the window, listening as her legal counsel delivered updates. They've started to feel it, he said. Evelyn nodded. They're still comfortable. For now. She turned from the glass. Let them be. The man hesitated. Daniel may attempt legal action. Evelyn's expression didn't change. He signed away his leverage in court this morning. She checked the time. 3 hours until 4. Outside, New York moved on, unaware that by the end of the day, one man would step up to a microphone believing he was in control, and realize too late that the floor beneath him had already been removed. The press conference was supposed to be Daniel Harper's moment of relief. By 3:45 that afternoon, the lobby of Harper Consolidated's headquarters had been transformed into a controlled spectacle. A temporary podium stood beneath the company's brushed steel logo. Cameras were already positioned. Microphones clustered together like a metallic bouquet, each one branded with a familiar network insignia. Producers whispered into headsets. Assistants checked lighting angles. Everything looked correct, which only made the tension sharper. Daniel stood in a glass-walled office above the lobby, watching the setup below. From this angle, the reporters looked small, manageable. He told himself that meant something. Lauren paced behind him, heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. She had changed outfits twice already. Now she wore a tailored navy dress that projected seriousness without humility. Her hair was perfect. Her phone wasn't. Why isn't anyone answering me? She demanded, staring at the screen. I've been calling your PR director for 20 minutes. Daniel didn't turn around. They're busy. They're always busy, Lauren snapped. But they usually call back. Daniel's jaw tightened. He reached for his phone again and scrolled through missed calls. Banks, advisors, numbers he recognized and numbers he didn't. No explanations, just silence and short messages asking him to confirm availability or discuss urgent developments. None of them said congratulations. You said this was done, Lauren continued, stopping near the window. You said she walked away with nothing. She did, Daniel said sharply. She signed. It's on record. Lauren folded her arms. Then why does it feel like everyone knows something we don't? Daniel finally turned to her. You're overreacting. She held his gaze, studying him the way people do when they start to doubt the story they've been repeating. I'm reacting. she said quietly, to the fact that your CFO won't answer my texts and the caterer just asked if they should cancel. Daniel's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from his assistant. Board is requesting your presence. Immediately, Daniel exhaled slowly. I need to handle something, he said, grabbing his jacket. Lauren stepped into his path. You're not leaving me down there alone. You'll be fine, he said, brushing past her. Smile. That's what you're good at. The words landed wrong. Lauren watched him leave, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. For the first time since the divorce papers were signed, doubt crept in, not about Evelyn, but about Daniel. Daniel took the elevator down to the executive floor, his foot tapping impatiently as the doors closed. He told himself this was normal. Big days came with noise, resistance, adjustment periods. But when the doors opened, the hallway was lined with people he hadn't expected to see. Legal counsel, compliance officers, 2 men from internal security. They weren't smiling. Daniel stepped out slowly. What's this? No one answered him directly. The chairman stood near the conference room doors, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't invite Daniel in. He waited for Daniel to approach him. Why wasn't I told about this meeting? Daniel asked. The chairman met his eyes. Because this meeting isn't about informing you. The words hit harder than Daniel expected. Inside the conference room, the board sat already assembled, their tablets lit, documents open. There was no small talk, no polite delay. Daniel took a seat at the head of the table out of habit. No one corrected him. The CFO cleared his throat. Daniel, we received formal notice from Vanguard Ridge. Daniel leaned back. I'm aware of their position. No, the CFO said. You're aware of what we thought their position was. He turned the tablet toward Daniel. It wasn't a spreadsheet this time. It was a legal notice. Transfer of controlling interest. Effective immediately. Daniel stared at the screen. This is forged. It's verified, the general counsel said. Filed an hour ago. Daniel shook his head. You can't transfer control without. Without majority? The chairman interrupted. Correct. Daniel exhaled sharply. Then this is posturing. It would be, the chairman said, if 2 institutional holders hadn't just completed off-market sales. Daniel's heart began to pound. To who? The chairman didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, to Evelyn Harper. The room felt like it shifted, like the building itself had leaned slightly to one side. That's not possible, Daniel said. She doesn't. The CFO raised a hand. Daniel, please stop. The room went still. Vanguard Ridge, the CFO continued, is a holding structure. It's been accumulating quietly for years. Today, its beneficial owner was formally disclosed. Daniel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The general counsel slid another document forward. This is a disclosure filing. Daniel scanned the page. His eyes caught on the name before his mind accepted it. Evelyn Grace Harper. Daniel pushed the paper away. This is a setup. No, the chairman said. It's preparation. The word stung. Daniel stood abruptly. You can't remove me. The chairman remained seated. We can suspend you. For what? For loss of confidence, the chairman replied. For material risk exposure. For failure to disclose relevant information to the board. Daniel laughed, sharp and brittle. You think this is her doing? You think she's some mastermind? No one answered. Daniel looked around the table, searching for support. He found none. Fine, he said. Suspend me. I'll fight this. The chairman nodded. You may. 2 members of security stepped closer to the door. Daniel's phone buzzed again. Lauren. He ignored it. Before you go, the general counsel said, there's one more thing. She tapped her tablet. The large screen on the wall lit up. A live news feed. A reporter stood outside the building, microphone raised, the Harper logo visible behind her. Sources confirming that Evelyn Harper, previously believed to have exited the marriage without assets, is now the controlling interest behind Vanguard Ridge, the holding company that has acquired majority stake in Harper Consolidated, Daniel felt his stomach drop. The reporter continued. Ms. Harper is expected to make a statement shortly. The previously scheduled press conference by Daniel Harper has been canceled. Canceled. Daniel stared at the screen as the narrative rewrote itself in real time. His phone buzzed again. This time he answered. Lauren's voice was tight. Daniel, they just escorted me out of the lobby. What? He snapped. They said the press conference was off, she said. They said the company isn't yours anymore. Daniel closed his eyes. In a boardroom several blocks away, Evelyn Harper watched the same broadcast without expression. She stood with her arms folded loosely, her legal team seated behind her. The room was quiet, deliberate. Are we ready? She asked. Yes, her communications director replied. Your statement is cued. Evelyn nodded. Release it. The screen changed. A still image of Evelyn appeared. Simple, professional, unsmiling. Her voice followed, recorded earlier, calm and controlled. This morning, I finalized a personal matter in court. I did so privately and without spectacle. This afternoon, I am confirming a business transition that has been in preparation for some time. Vanguard Ridge has acquired a controlling interest in Harper Consolidated. Effective immediately, I will serve as chair. The reporter's voice broke in, stunned. No comment on the divorce? Evelyn's recorded response was immediate. There is nothing to comment on. The law did its job. The broadcast cut back to the reporter. Daniel stared at the screen, the realization settling like weight on his chest. She hadn't rushed. She hadn't reacted. She had waited. Outside, the city continued moving. Cars honked. People walked. Lives unfolded without noticing the quiet collapse happening inside a glass tower. And for the first time since that courtroom gavel struck, Daniel Harper understood something he hadn't before. The divorce hadn't been the end of Evelyn Harper's story. It had been the beginning of his sentence. The silence after the announcement was louder than the announcement itself. In the glass tower that had once been Daniel Harper's domain, people moved differently now. Conversations lowered. Eye contact shortened. The building hadn't changed, but authority had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Power always announced itself through absence first. Meetings canceled, emails unanswered, doors that no longer open automatically. Daniel sat alone in a conference room that used to be reserved for strategic planning sessions. The blinds were half closed, cutting the city into narrow gray slats. His phone lay face down on the table, buzzing intermittently like a warning he didn't want to read. Across the table sat his attorney, Robert Hale, a man who had built a career cleaning up messes created by other men's confidence. Robert's tie was loosened, his legal pad untouched. He wasn't rushing. That alone frightened Daniel. This isn't over, Daniel said, breaking the silence. She manipulated the board. Robert looked at him carefully. She outmaneuvered you. Daniel scoffed. She signed away everything in court. Yes, Robert agreed, and that's why this worked. Daniel frowned. That makes no sense. Robert leaned back. You thought the divorce was a battlefield. It wasn't. It was camouflage. Daniel rubbed his temples. We can sue. We can file motions, Robert corrected. But suing requires standing. And right now, you don't have much of it. Daniel slammed his palm lightly on the table. She humiliated me. Robert didn't respond. She embarrassed me in front of everyone, Daniel continued, voice rising. She waited until... Daniel, Robert interrupted quietly. She didn't humiliate you. Daniel stopped. You did, Robert finished. The words hung in the air. Robert continued, slower now. She never raised her voice. She never contradicted you publicly. She let you speak. She let Lauren pose. She let the narrative form without interference. Daniel swallowed. She set me up? Yes, Robert said calmly. And you walked into it willingly. Daniel stood and paced the room, his footsteps sharp against the floor. Lauren didn't know, he said, as if that mattered. She thought. Lauren believed the story you sold her, Robert replied, that you were in control. Daniel stopped pacing. What do I do? Robert hesitated. That was worse than any answer. You wait, Robert said finally, and you hope she's finished. Daniel laughed bitterly. You don't sound confident. Robert met his eyes. I've read the filings. She's not finished. Across the city, Evelyn Harper sat in a different kind of room. The boardroom she now occupied wasn't louder or grander than the others she'd passed through that day. It was smaller, more contained, designed for decisions, not theater. The walls were lined with shelves holding binders and reports rather than art. A single window overlooked the river, gray and steady. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, reviewing documents with steady rhythm, not rushing, not lingering. Each page was considered, signed, set aside. Her chief compliance officer cleared his throat. We've completed the internal audit you requested. Evelyn didn't look up. Findings? Extensive, he said. Executive expense abuse, conflicts of interest, undisclosed compensation agreements. She turned a page. Names! He slid a list across the table. Evelyn scanned it without expression. Daniel's name appeared more than once. Lauren's did too, though indirectly, tied to consulting fees and vendor relationships that had never been disclosed shareholders. Evelyn closed the folder. Notify the appropriate agencies. There was no drama in the instruction, just inevitability. The compliance officer nodded. SEC will open an inquiry. Possibly, though. Good, Evelyn said. Transparency is important. Her communications director shifted in her seat. Public sentiment is turning, she said. People are questioning Daniel's leadership now. The affair is no longer the headline. What is? Evelyn asked. Competence, the director replied. Or the lack of it. Evelyn nodded once. Then we're on schedule. In a quiet corner of Manhattan, Lauren Mitchell sat alone in a cafe she'd never visited before. She had chosen it because no one there recognized her. The noise of the espresso machine filled the gaps where her thoughts used to be. Her phone lay on the table, screen dark. Daniel hadn't answered her last 3 calls. She stared into her coffee, replaying moments she'd dismissed before. The way Evelyn hadn't argued, the way she'd signed without protest, the way she looked at Lauren in the courtroom, not angry, not broken, observing. Lauren's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You should check the filings. Lauren frowned and opened her browser. It didn't take long to find them. Headlines had shifted quickly. Regulators review Harper consolidated transactions. Board examines undisclosed relationships. Questions raised about executive ethics. Lauren's stomach tightened. She scrolled. Her name appeared in one article, carefully worded, framed as a consultant whose compensation raised ethical concerns. Consultant? That wasn't what Daniel had promised her. Her phone rang. Daniel. She answered immediately. Why is my name in these articles? Daniel's voice sounded distant. I didn't put it there. They're saying I benefited from company money, she said, panic creeping in. They're saying I didn't know, Daniel snapped. I didn't know she'd do this. She, Lauren repeated. You mean Evelyn? Yes, Daniel said. She's behind everything. Lauren laughed, sharp and humorless. You told me she was nothing. Daniel didn't respond. Lauren lowered her voice. Daniel, did you know she owned a company? Silence. That's what I thought, Lauren said softly. She ended the call. Back in the tower, Evelyn stood at the window, watching the river move with patient force. The city reflected in the glass behind her. Busy, unaware, unbothered. Her legal counsel approached quietly. Daniel has requested a private meeting. Evelyn didn't turn. When? Tonight. Evelyn considered this for a moment, not because she was tempted, because timing mattered. Where? She asked. He suggested your old apartment. Evelyn's lips curved slightly. Not a smile. Recognition. No, she said. Neutral ground. Where? The conference room on 47th, Evelyn replied. The one without windows. Her counsel nodded. Understood. Evelyn finally turned from the glass. And Lauren, her communications director, hesitated. She's distancing herself. Evelyn nodded. As expected. She gathered her papers. stacking them neatly. This phase wasn't about collapse. It was about comprehension. Daniel would lose money. He would lose status. But those were consequences. What came next was understanding. And understanding, Evelyn knew, was the heaviest punishment of all. The conference room on 47th Street had no windows by design. It was the kind of room corporations use when they wanted conversations to exist without witnesses. Gray walls, a long, narrow table, overhead lighting calibrated to be bright enough to remove shadows, but not warm enough to be inviting. No art, no plants, nothing that suggested comfort. Daniel Harper arrived early. He sat alone at the table, jacket folded neatly beside him, hands clasped together like he was waiting for a verdict. The room smelled faintly of cleaning solvent and recycled air. Every few seconds, he glanced at the door, then at the clock mounted high on the wall. 6:27. Evelyn had not confirmed the meeting time. That, Daniel realized, was intentional. When the door finally opened, it did so without ceremony. Evelyn stepped inside alone. She wore a charcoal gray coat over a simple black dress, her hair pulled back, her posture composed. She didn't carry a briefcase. She didn't carry papers. Whatever she needed, she already had. She closed the door behind her and stood for a moment, looking at Daniel the way one might look at a place they no longer lived in. No anger, no nostalgia, just assessment. Daniel stood quickly. "Thank you for coming." Evelyn didn't respond immediately. She walked to the opposite side of the table and sat down, placing her hands flat on the surface. Only then did she speak. "You asked for this meeting." Daniel swallowed. "I needed to understand." Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "Understand what?" "How you did it," Daniel said. "When? Why?" Evelyn's expression remained neutral. "You don't need to understand how. You need to understand why." Daniel exhaled. "I never meant to destroy you." Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. "You didn't destroy me." Daniel hesitated. "I humiliated you." Evelyn considered this. "You tried." The silence that followed was heavier than Daniel expected. "I thought you were comfortable," Daniel said finally. "I thought you were content being adjacent." Evelyn's eyes flicked to the blank wall behind him, then back. "That's because you mistook my restraint for dependence." Daniel leaned forward. "Why wait until now?" "Because," Evelyn replied, "this was the moment you believed you were untouchable." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Lauren." "Yes," Evelyn said calmly. "Lauren." Daniel flinched. "She didn't know." "She didn't need to," Evelyn replied. "She believed the version of you that benefited her. That was enough." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "You let us parade." "Yes." "You let me announce a divorce." "Yes." "You let me schedule a press conference." "Yes." Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "You let me look like a fool." Evelyn's tone remained even. "You chose to." Daniel stared at her. "So this was punishment?" "No," Evelyn said. "This was consequence." Daniel laughed once, bitter. "You're enjoying this." Evelyn shook her head. "Enjoyment requires emotion. This requires accuracy." Daniel sat back slowly. "What happens now?" Evelyn folded her hands. "Now you live inside the reality you created." Daniel frowned. "You're freezing me out. The banks won't return my calls. My accounts are under review. My name is being dragged through." Evelyn raised a hand, not sharply, just enough to stop him. "You signed authority away in court. You dismissed governance. You blurred personal relationships with corporate resources." She paused. "The system is responding exactly as designed." Daniel stared at the table. "You could stop it." Evelyn didn't deny it. "Yes." Daniel looked up, hope flashing briefly. "Then why won't you?" "Because stopping would protect you," Evelyn replied. "And protection was never part of our agreement." Daniel's shoulders sagged slightly. "You could have ruined me quietly." "I am," Evelyn said. He looked confused. "You're still speaking," she continued. "Still hoping. Still explaining yourself. Public ruin is loud. Private comprehension lasts longer." Daniel closed his eyes. "What do you want from me?" he asked. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, not threatening, just deliberate. "I want you to understand something before this ends." Daniel nodded slowly. "You didn't lose because I was smarter," Evelyn said. "You lost because you believed power belonged to you by default." Daniel opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Evelyn continued. "You believed loyalty was permanent. That silence meant weakness. That restraint meant absence." She sat back. Those assumptions built the trap. Daniel swallowed hard. "Lauren's lawyers called me." Evelyn nodded. "She's distancing herself. She says she didn't sign up for this." "No one ever does," Evelyn replied. Daniel looked up. "You're not coming after her." "No," Evelyn said. "She's already irrelevant." The word stung more than any accusation. Daniel laughed quietly. "You always did know where to aim." Evelyn stood. Daniel stood too, panic flaring. "Is that it?" Evelyn paused, considering him. "No." Daniel's breath caught. "There will be regulatory findings," Evelyn said calmly. "There will be settlements. You will resign from the board permanently. Your severance will be reduced to statutory minimum." She picked up her coat. "You will keep enough to live, not enough to lead." Daniel's voice was barely audible. "And my name?" Evelyn met his eyes. "Your name will become a footnote, not infamous, not heroic." She opened the door. Just instructive. Daniel sank back into his chair as Evelyn left the room. He remained there long after the door closed, staring at the blank wall, replaying moments he'd once dismissed as unimportant. The silence pressed in. Across town, Lauren Mitchell stood in her apartment, surrounded by boxes she hadn't finished unpacking. Her phone buzzed with another message from her attorney. "We need to talk about exposure." She set the phone down and stared at the floor. For the first time, she wondered what it would feel like to be forgotten. Back in the tower overlooking the river, Evelyn Harper sat alone in her office, reviewing the final compliance report. She signed the last page and closed the folder. The city lights flickered on outside. Her assistant knocked softly. "Ms. Harper?" "Yes." "The regulators will announce their findings tomorrow morning." Evelyn nodded. "Schedule the internal briefing." "And Daniel?" Evelyn looked out at the dark water. "He's finished understanding." She turned off the office light and walked out without looking back. The morning the findings were released, New York felt unusually quiet. Not silent, just subdued, as if the city itself had decided not to interfere. The sky over the river was a pale gray, the kind that flattened sound and softened edges. Evelyn Harper arrived early, not because she needed to, but because she preferred to be present before consequences became visible. Her office lights remained off. She stood near the window, coffee untouched on the desk behind her, watching a tugboat cut slowly across the water. Movement without urgency. Progress without noise. At 9 o'clock, the notifications began. First the regulators, then the exchanges, then the media. The findings were precise, clinical, unemotional, improper use of corporate funds, failure to disclose conflicts of interest, breach of fiduciary duty, patterns, not incidents, decisions, not accidents. Daniel Harper's name appeared exactly where it should have, mid-paragraph, unbolded, unsensational. No adjectives, no speculation, just record. Evelyn sat down and read the full report once, front to back. She didn't skim. She didn't linger. When she finished, she closed the document and placed it in the outbox for archiving. Her phone rang. It was Robert Hale. "Morning," he said quietly. "Good morning," Evelyn replied. "It's done," Robert said. "Daniel has agreed to the settlement. Full resignation. Permanent board removal. No public contest." Evelyn nodded, though he couldn't see it. "And the non-disparagement?" "Signed," Robert said. "Mutual, but asymmetrical. He can't speak. You don't need to." "Good," Evelyn said. There was a pause. "For what it's worth," Robert added, "this could have gone very differently." "Yes," Evelyn agreed. "It often does." She ended the call and set the phone down. Across town, Daniel Harper sat at a small table in an apartment. He had rented under an LLC that no longer impressed anyone. The space was clean but temporary, furnished by necessity rather than taste. A cardboard box labeled documents sat unopened by the door. He stared at his laptop screen, the settlement agreement still open. His name appeared dozens of times, each instance paired with words he had once assumed applied to other people. Resignation, forfeiture, compliance. He scrolled to the end and stopped at the signature line. Daniel Harper. He signed. The action didn't feel dramatic. It felt administrative. His phone buzzed. Lauren's name flashed on the screen, then disappeared as the call went to voicemail. He didn't listen to the message. He already knew the shape of it. Confusion, fear, distance. Distance was contagious. Daniel closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. For the first time in years, there was nothing scheduled. No meeting, no call, no damage to manage. He looked around the apartment, taking inventory of what remained. Enough money to live, enough reputation to avoid pity, not enough influence to matter. Evelyn had been exact. Back in the tower, Evelyn walked into the smaller boardroom for the internal briefing. The team stood as she entered, then sat when she did. No applause, no congratulations. That had been made clear in advance. The findings are public, her compliance officer said. Markets are stabilizing. Employee sentiment is positive. Good, Evelyn said. The communications director glanced up from her tablet. There's a question circulating, she said carefully. People are asking if you feel vindicated. Evelyn considered this. No, she said. Vindication implies injury. This was correction. The director nodded and made a note. Another executive spoke. There's also interest in your personal story. Interviews. Profiles. Evelyn shook her head. Decline. Completely? Yes. Silence settled over the table. Not awkward, just clear. Then that concludes a transition, the chairman said. Evelyn stood. Thank you. She left the room alone. Later that afternoon, she walked out of the building without security, without announcement. She crossed the street and entered a small park by the river, sitting on a bench that faced the water. The city moved behind her. Footsteps, laughter, distant horns, but none of it demanded her attention. She checked her phone once. No new messages. That was how she preferred it. Across the city, Daniel Harper watched the same river from a different angle. Standing on a pedestrian bridge he had never bothered to notice before. He leaned against the railing, hands in his pockets, staring at the slow movement below. He replayed the courtroom moment in his mind, the pen, the signature, the calm. He understood now, not how she did it, why she waited. Evelyn had never fought him, because fighting would have centered him. Instead, she had removed herself from the equation until the system had nothing left to protect. The realization settled quietly, heavier than anger. That evening, the news cycle moved on. A different scandal, a louder story, a sharper fall. Evelyn Harper's name appeared once more, briefly, attached to a headline about corporate restructuring. No mention of divorce. No mention of revenge. Just outcome. At home, Evelyn placed her coat on the chair by the door and turned off the lights. The apartment was quiet, orderly, hers. She poured herself a glass of water and stood for a moment, listening to the city through the open window. No celebration, no relief, just completion. She closed the window and went to bed, knowing that tomorrow would arrive without resistance. And that was enough.